What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here, and patch 10.24 is hitting League of Legends. The notes came out early. It's Monday instead of Tuesday. So cool. That's nice. Let's talk about what's going on in this patch. I think a lot is good. I think there's some things that are missing, but let's get into it overall. Patch 10.24, and obviously this is pretty much a response to patch 10.23. If you didn't know, there were several hot fixes, or I guess micro patches during 10.23. So all the Sunfire upgrades got nerfed. There was, I believe, a hotfix nerf to Amumu. There was a hotfix nerf to Victor. There was a hotfix nerf to Eclipse, and probably a couple other things I'm not thinking about right now, but there were several updates during that patch. So yeah, they had a lot of updates and bug fixes during that one, so hey, by the way. Okay, so let's talk about what's going on to this patch. There are specific buffs to Tryndamere and Varus. Where they say updated because it's can only ever be a nerf to Yasuo and Yone, and then also nerfs to Amumu, Hecarim, Kayle, and Samira, which, yeah, all those champions were super duper OP. Bunch of item updates, which is good. I'm glad they have come in pretty quickly with item changes. Certainly, I will say crit marksman and auto attack marksman in general, which pretty much auto attack marksmen are crit marksmen because those are the items you build if you're an auto attacker. Otherwise, you build lethality. Auto attack marksmen definitely were a lot weaker outside of maybe Kog'Maw as a pretty solid Rageblade user. Even that was mediocre. The lethality users were doing great. So, Jhin and MF were really happy. Samira benefited from the fact that life still got a lot better, so that was kind of nice. But otherwise, you really could only play 3 champions that were super effective. So, good to see some updates on that side. That said, probably still work to be done. We know mage junglers are in a really, really, really bad spot off losing Runic Echoes. I don't imagine this patch fixes that issue. Anyway, let's get into the patch itself, and then I'll probably have more of a conclusion after we go through all of the notes. So Amumu is getting a bigger nerf because his champion is overperforming as probably the single best tank jungler right now. Of note, it's hard to scrape public data because you can't really ask it to tell you what happened post hotfix when they nerfed all the Sunfire items, but Amumu was definitely the best of all the tank junglers, but all the tank junglers are outstanding with new Sunfire Aegis, or in Skarner's case, Turbo Chem Tank, or in some of the other cases, Frostfire Gauntlet, or Ice whatever it's called. That actually might be the actual name of it. Regardless, Amumu, the strongest performer, but there are still a lot of very, very, very good tank junglers, and we'll see how much Riot wants to take down over time, but certainly the best junglers in the game are still going to be tank junglers. It's just Rammus instead of Amumu now, realistically from what I can tell. So, Despair's base damage is going down by a bit. Now keep in mind, Despair has a base damage and a percent health damage component to it, and the AP ratio is another percent health damage component, which makes math get a little bit awkward, but as per usual, we just take the champion itself as the example health bar, and we assume we're pretty close. And so, also apparently there's a bug where it would sometimes fire at an increased pace. I don't know how much that would be, but if it's like, oh, it's 20% more damage, that is a really, really substantial nerf coming through. But they didn't tell us, so who knows. So, here we go. As we get blinded, this will happen 15 times during this rundown as we skip back and forth. Amumu is basically, we're dropping the damage from 5 to 4. We're dropping the percent health damage, to the same. And here is the damage difference. It is down 12 to 9% based on when you're hitting targets. Now, of course, the more health champions have, the less this nerf matters, and vice versa, because the flat damage changed, but the health damage did not. And then we try again at 100 ability power, which is Amumu going Sunfire Aegis, and then also into Demonic Embrace afterwards. Certainly, yeah, for the first, several levels here, probably, the first 9 or so, you're never going to have Demonic Embrace online as well. But if you were rushing Liandry's, then yes, this would have counted. But you're still losing pretty substantial damage. If we undo, right, if you were going to rush Liandry or something, then yeah, you're looking at a meaningful 23% damage cut. But even, at a more moderate point in the game, you're still losing about 20% of your overall W damage from the AP ratio change, from the W base damage change, and in the day, yeah, pretty meaningful nerf. So overall, Amumu sizably nerfed in this patch. His primary damage tool was, in fact, his W. You can max it first or second. This slightly incentivizes you to not max it early, so it's still going to be second, not first, and you shouldn't do it third. You should actually just increase his damage, so it's important to get the ranks here, but let's move on. Moving into Hecarim, who's losing just a little bit, losing about a fifth. of the bonus move speed into AD conversion. We are also losing some more move speed on Devastating Charge. And this allows us to do the exact same thing that happened with Caitlyn, much to my chagrin. Riot decided to buff a champion who was already good. By doing so, they indeed injected the champion into pro play. I have a question, though, and it's a little rhetorical because I have my opinion on it, but it's actually a question worth asking because you can measure these things differently. Hecarim saw a little bit of pro play, and Caitlyn, well, she was 100% banned for a while, but then saw some pro play. Was that variety, and in Caitlyn's case, lack of variety, worth the extra pain that everyone else had to suffer through in dealing with OP champions because they were buffed when they were already strong? And I have a problem with this, personally, which is why I'm calling it a rhetorical question, because I don't think this was worth it. As someone who played League of Legends through the, end of the 2020 season and cast professional League of Legends in the 2020 season, it was fun seeing Hecarim show up once in a while. I'll give you that. Hecarim showed up, and that was interesting, but all of solo queue was consistently terrorized by Hecarim. Now, I played a fair bit of jungle Hecarim and got to win a bunch of games because the champion's busted, and hey, it was fun to smurf on kids with an OP champ, but it's not good for League of Legends. So, really just not a fan of these kinds of changes, where Riot knew these champions were good, chose to buff them anyway to add some, pro spice, when there are 60 other champions that are objectively weak and could be buffed to, include pro spice. So I am very much not a fan of the, live design team doing these kinds of buffs, because invariably they get reverted and the champions get further nerfed. So even the champion mains are sad about this, right? No one won here. The champion mains are sad. Hecarim is now literally weaker than before Riot did this. Everyone else had to deal with Hecarim the entire time. And in Caitlyn's case, it was so overshot that Caitlyn was just 100% pick ban, which made pro play worse. And in Hecarim's case, we got to see him once in a while. Right? So the hit rate is low, the net enjoyment is low. I hate these kinds of changes, and here we are. Hecarim is now nerfed from before where he was before. Let's move on. Oh, we have numbers real quick, though. We can talk about this. This is not very complete, I want to be clear, but this is just using boots 1 and boots 2 with plus 25, plus 45 move speed. This is how much total attack damage Hecarim has pre and post patch via the nerfs, and you can see it's actually not very big, right? We're losing about 1% or about 2% of Hecarim's total attack damage. What this really means is, this feeds into the E damage and the E charge speed, and here's a bug fix that makes it even slower as well. So this is going to be meaningful, right? The change that made Hecarim from pretty good champion to the best champion in the game was 2575 becoming 2500, which you wouldn't think was that big. And to give Riot some credit, that change probably did look pretty small. And wasn't supposed to be overshot so heavily, but it got walked back to 85 and then got walked back all the way and then walked back with a bug fix and then walked back with this nerf, right? It's just I don't want to keep treading old ground. But anyway, this is a big deal. The attack damage component mostly cares about this part, and there's where we are. So Kayle, unfortunately, and I don't actually hate that this happened. This was a stab, and it wasn't quite right. So Riot did a couple of champion changes at the same time as preseason, and I think that is okay. It was already going to be pretty messy. You already didn't know exactly where champions are going to land. I think it's okay to bundle champion changes in with that. I really do think that's fine. The end result was that Kayle was super duper overpowered. Her items got better, right? She didn't have to pay for cooldown reduction on Lichbane because she didn't need CDR on Lichbane anymore because she's not toggling her E on and off. Not Lichbane. Well, Lichbane certainly, but Nashor's Tooth as well. Kayle got to spend much more efficiently on her items. And yeah, sure, in retrospect, it was pretty obvious Kayle was going to get a lot stronger with the new items. But again, I don't actually hate the fact that Riot buffed Kayle the same time they added new items to the game, because I think this is a cool design choice. Hey, you can turn AP into attack speed. That's kind of fun. Now, I want to point out that this passive, it says 2% more attack speed per 100 ability power. This can stack, I think it's 5 times. So it's really kind of 10% attack speed per 100 AP. Not all the time, obviously, you have to go up and get ascended and all that stuff, but essentially, yeah. This is not really 2% becomes 1%. It's really more like 10% becomes 5% for every item you actually buy. So here is the actual math here on Kayle. Yeah, sure, you're not going to have 100 AP at level 1, resulting in this change here. Keep in mind that I'm again considering, champion base stats, champion levels, and the passive. The passive is, again, we're assuming full stacks the whole time, is a flat 30% bonus attack speed. So with 100 AP, this is 30 plus, yeah, 30 plus 10 because 5 stacks. 30 plus 10 is 40%. This is 30 plus 5 is 35%. So there is 5% less additive attack speed here. End of the day, that is a 3.7% DPS nerf. Down to the very end of the game, assuming you never bought any other AP or any other attack speed, it would be a 3% DPS nerf. Obviously, yes, Kale really builds Nashor's Tooth and mythics and all these other items, so he chose 400 AP as our other option. Again, Nashor's Tooth would probably be in this build somewhere, which further further lowers how much this really matters. But we can see that it's and realistically, again, 400 AP is not realistic in the first few levels of the game, so we can kind of start at 15 plus. And look, it is 10% less attacks. 10% fewer attacks, kind of. Again, the more attack speed items you have, the less, the smaller this difference from 100 actually is. Because as Nash's goes in, and if Zerk Greaves come in, and whatever else, these numbers change, sure, of course, but this is a pretty meaningful overall change to Kale's attack speed. Her items are also getting nerfed, so that's going to be a big deal. And yeah, Kale, who is one of the very best champions in League of Legends right now, is getting nerfed in 2 places, and that's fine, because Kale's like a 56% win rate champion, and worth nerfing in 2 places. Yeah. Let's move on. Samira, other than Jhin, is basically the best performing bot laner in League of Legends. In fact, her ban rate is absurdly high. Certainly, she's very frustrating. I mean, she is a marksman with very good defensive tools. I want to think back to how much everyone complained about Vayne constantly. How many people have complained about, Caitlyn and Varus constantly, because those champions hit you from out of your range. You can't do anything about them. Samira has her active wind wall. And, then lifesteal tanks your entire team in a team fight. And certainly Samira is overtuned. As much as people are complaining about how marksmen are totally non-viable and they're all trash and why would you play one, we have very easy ways to measure this. I want to be clear about something. We're gonna use this section because there's no other marksman champion changes in this patch. We're gonna go on this diatribe. You can scrub the video until the screen moves, and then I'm not on this anymore, if you don't want to listen to this. We have a very easy measurement for did marksman as an overall class get stronger or weaker. This is a thing you can do very commonly in statistics. I have my vocabulary wrong because I haven't studied that in 11 years, but what it goes down to is you measure something that directly competes with it that didn't change. So for example, Swain was the best bot laner in League of Legends pre-patch and still is. But what you do is you look at the other champions in the role. Did Ziggs gain win rate in bot lane? Because most of the time, Ziggs is against Ashe and Twitch and Jhin and Samira and Varus and whoever else and Ezreal. And Karthus is against all these champions. And Yasuo was against all these champions. And Swain is against all these champions, and Veigar as a carry bot lane is against all these champions. And you can use those and their win rate changes to measure did marksman as an overall class get stronger or weaker. Because and of course, yes. Of course, there are biases here, right? Ziggs got all kinds of new items to play with. Who knows where his power level is going to go when Luden's Tempest exists now? Yes, it can be very hard to measure when everyone changes at the same time. Yes, this is in fact hard to measure. You have to do more stuff, like comparing Ziggs mid lane to champions who didn't get their items changed very much. It gets really difficult. But at the end of the day, what I saw mostly is Jhin and Samira gained a ton because they won the item game, right? They won the item game. They came out very far ahead because Jhin got a whole bunch of great new awesome lethality toys that are really, really strong. And even if you don't want to go lethality toys, he's actually really good with Gale Force. It's not as good as Eclipse. Eclipse is really overpowered. Turns out Eclipse users are really, really strong. On the same boat, you have Samira who can feel good about buying Shield Bow first item, that's going to be amazing. Can feel good about Bloodthirster second item, that's going to feel amazing. And feel good about AD carry lethality options like Collector because she is a spell casting crit champion. That's really, really rare. Samira won the item game. So those champions gained a bunch of power. And the thing is, Jhin and Samira, are very, very, very popular. Samira is the newest bot laner in League of Legends, and Jhin has been one of the most popular champions in League of Legends for the last like 5 years, or whatever. So, uh, popular champions being strong depresses everyone's win rates by quite a bit. Um, Now that said, we still have champions like Swain who didn't get depressed very much, and champions like Karthus who didn't get depressed very much. And you can look at other examples like I think like Vel costs at 50%. And I want to be really clear about something. I'm not claiming that auto attack marksmen are in a great spot now. I'm saying that you can measure this by using other champions' win rate deltas as your barometer for did these champions actually get better or worse overall as a class. As we'll see down the line, there are some buffs going into AD carry items, and rightly so. Like Xayah and Sivir are in a pretty bad spot. I'm just here to say, like, hey, you can, or at least one can measure this reasonably well. Anyway, so Samira got nerfed, and these are really meaningful. Samira's going to lose a lot here. Okay, so first of all, her melee blade attack damage ratio. So if you don't know, Samira has a ranged auto attack, shoots her gun, not a big problem. She can also, if you're in roughly melee range, she'll strike with her sword instead. Now, the sword has a flat damage component, and it has a percent total AD component. Now, normally I know when I do things like this, I sum it up into the total AD as well, and I can in a second here and just like drag down and it'll be different. But basically, right, Samira does, I think, 1 plus her level in flat damage, and what was 10% total AD becomes 7.5% total AD. Again, total AD, not bonus AD, so it starts out pretty high. So we can pretty easily change this by making this 1.1 and making this 1.075. And so her total damage with her blade is actually this, and it's down 1 to 2%. The other way to think about it is how much damage are you adding in? There we go. And yeah, you were adding 20 to 10% more damage. Or, I mean, sorry, you're adding 8 to 29, and now you're adding 6 to 26. The additive damage is down by 20 to 30. The overall damage of her auto attacking you in melee range is down about 2%. Sure, okay, so those two ways to look at the number, not a big problem right there. The next one is actually a really, really, really big deal. So Samira's attack range is, I believe, 500 or 525. I don't believe she's 550. I've actually played a lot of Samira this patch. I just don't remember what her attack range is. So this is the other part of Samira, which if you don't know, if a teammate, or even you with a blast cone, I think, if someone gets hard CC'd on the enemy team, you can try to auto attack them. It's a little bit like Yasuo Ultimate, where you will dash in to your auto attack range, 525 or whatever, and knock them up for like a half a second or like 0.35 or something like that, and get 1 stack in your column meter, and then play League of Legends. So the range at which you can acquire this target has been very substantially nerfed. And this is a really, 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 really big deal. A lot of what's made Samira very frustrating in the early game is the fact that she can so easily follow up off a Lux Binding or a Thresh Hook or a Nautilus Q because they're cheating up. You kind of follow them, but I mean, name a champion other than Samira who can see a max range Thresh Hook and immediately auto attack that champion. Right? Sivir has 500 range, or she actually might be 450. Okay, Ashe has 600 range, so at least she goes pretty far. But like when Nautilus lands the max range, Nautilus hook, like Ashe has to like hope that volley can land, and then walk up to 600 and then auto attack. And then, she might get one auto, then the root lands, might get a second auto. Okay, the temple turns on. Cool, let's play League of Legends. That's what Ashe has to do. Samira can be 200 range past where Ashe has to be and just go, whoop, I'm in range. And that's really, really powerful, right? This allows Samira so much extra destruction in the laning phase that this is a very big deal. I like that it still scales with level. Now, I tend to not like CC duration scalings in almost any way that are non-ultimate because I like the learnability of how long CCs last. I know tenacity exists, but like I think it's still valuable to not have skills change. And I also really tend to dislike range differences. Again, non-ultimates being the variation because, okay, level 6 Nocturne versus level 11 Nocturne versus level 16 Nocturne. These are kind of obvious things you can look at and be like, oh, rank 2 ultimate. He definitely ranked the ulti, his range goes up. Like, those are places where I'm like totally cool with like learnability changing. knowing when Nocturne can ult you is an important thing to learn. If it changes 5 times a game, that's really crappy. If it changes twice a game, that's way less bad. And so even though I tend to not like consistently changing range scaling, this is a place where I think it makes sense. Saying, no, Samir, you cannot freely follow up. You can follow up at Caitlyn range, which is, I'll be honest, pretty reasonable. In the first few levels, we do our BF Sword power spike around here. Okay, 725 is pretty long, but again, it's still substantially nerfed from before. And then we get into a later game team fight, then it's like, yeah, go take your 900-ish range. Like, that's fine. I'm generally pretty okay with that. Now, yes, I certainly play a fair bit of Samir, but I also play against Samir a lot as well, being a primary bot laner. I personally am comfortable with this. Samira is going to lose a lot of win rate. I'm really, really a fan of how much they nerf the early game dash range. Huge deal there. A bit of less blade damage. There is a chance this hits wave clear points. I know that around level 5 or 7 with a Noon Quiver, Q auto one-shots caster minions. That might change. Q sword auto, by the way, because they're both applying sword damage, and if the sword damage is in fact down by 2 to like 3 per hit, there's a chance that breaks the wave clear. That would be actually a pretty meaningful spike as well. It would be pretty meaningful to Samir because getting to hard shove waves is something that Samir is very good at. And if she's worse at that, she can't move around, she can't get back to safety as quickly. That will have knock-on effects as well. All right, let's move on. Tryndamere is doing very poorly. So they're doing straight up Tryndamere buffs because he's doing very poorly post-patch. They did what? They buffed his very early game, but nerfed his late game by only letting him get 40% crit chance through his passive instead of letting it go to 55% or something. So certainly a big deal there. But basically, he's getting a flat 5 AD. I kind of find it strange that. So I get why it has a flat value at all, right? It makes the ability to do something when you rank it up. Say I learned Q, I got 5 AD, cool. And then I ranked up Q, I got 5 AD. I don't mind this part of it. I find it a little strange that they are saying, Tryndamere, we need to buff your AD by 5, so it's going into the Q and not into your base stats. I don't know why that feels weird to me. It just does, though. Because it's functionally base stats. I mean, I guess it nerfs his level 1, or it doesn't buff his level 1 if he goes for, spin mass autos to, all in someone who can't fight him back. But it's functionally 5 AD from level 2 onwards, and it just feels strange that functionally base stats aren't base stats. And Riot's just kind of lying to us about his I don't know. It's it doesn't matter in any practical application of the game. I just feel bad. Minor thing. The major buffs, though, are here, where the rank up on Q is further incentivized with an extra, I believe it's actual 5 attack damage per rank up at 1% or 0% health. So here is our new data table. Here is Tryndamere's attack damage at full. Again, 5 AD. This champion now has 79 base attack damage. His stat sheet says 69. Nice, but he actually has 79 base attack damage. And it goes up to, a solid +5, 162 base AD. And yeah, again, giving Tryndamere a reason to rank up Q, totally reasonable. Right? Having an ability that says, hey, by the way, learn this, get more attack damage is totally fine for a champion that is meant to be simple to play. Right? You read the tooltip to go, oh my gosh, I gain 30 damage all the time, and I gain another 55 afterwards? That's 85 attack damage. That's awesome. Great tooltip, good design, love, totally happy about this, right? I think this is a well-designed ability. I think it's cool stuff. I'm not mad that it's just stats. That it's reasonable. And again, to go back on my earlier point, a tooltip being exciting is important. Right? I've generally been a proponent of, if your champion has inflated base stats, try to deflate those base stats and put that power into tooltips. And this is Tryndamere having a 79 base AD, but it's actually in the tooltips. So, going literally 180, what I said before, this is probably the better version in terms of player enjoyment. Because a tooltip that says you gain 10 attack damage is better than your base stats, never telling you anything. So yeah, this form of it is in fact more enjoyment. So yeah, sure. I mean, you could actually have a version where legitimately Tryndamere Q had just a champion level scaling, and maybe it meant that he was bad with Sheen or whatever, but it's just the Q just told you that you gained 2.7 attack damage per level, and you just didn't have base stats. I mean, that feels pretty scummy at that point, so maybe not. But again, I like tooltips being exciting. I think it's a positive thing to do. Try to design around. Anyway, yeah, you max Q first. I'm pretty confident in. So you get your very low health, and you have a full-on 25 more attack damage, right? You have 5 attack damage all the time, and then 0 to 20 more on top of that at low life based on rank. And so, yeah, pretty meaningful AD growth to Tryndamere. This allows Tryndamere to, it excuses item math a little bit. It means he can push towards the attack speed versions of his items much more often. Doesn't have to buy the attack damage versions as much because he's got enough AD on the baseline that you want to multiply with attack speed more often. So this can shift his items around a little bit. It's obviously a strict buff to Tryndamere. Cool beans. Next up, a follow-up on Varus. Varus has been tossed around a lot over time. So where he is now is a spot where they have changed around the mechanics. So W has a very poor rank up. They changed W rank up from 3.5 damage per rank to simply 1 damage per rank. I'm going to assume that you will max W last. Now, I'll also point out that the W has a percent max health damage on it, which I believe goes from 9 to 15% at 3 stacks based on rank. It's 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5% per stack with 3 stats. Asterisk, you can get a 4th stack if you use your E. That's been true the entire time. It's still true here. But what's going on here? Okay, well, the flat damage and auto attack is going down. Okay, whatever. Rip on hit Varus, I guess. They're saying, nope, Cast of Varus is the gameplay. We're not playing on hit Varus. We already have Kog'Maw. Deal with it. And I think that's fine, actually. Like, I really think Varus... I mean, I think if they rebuilt Varus today, they would move his W to his actual passive and give him a real W, because the, like, I kill, then get attack speed, and I go rapid fire guy. Like, I just don't think on hit Varus is interesting. It's just, like, it's just not really the build. Yeah, it's like, oh, but what about AP Varus? Like, I guess there's an AP ratio on W, sure, but then, put your AP ratios there, right? Like, make on-hit Varus have to go Lichbane. Don't just give him Ruin King, Rage Blade, Infinity Edge. Like, do the Twitch thing, right? Where you actually put ratios on different things and move on from there. And you make that explosion deal magic damage, which, hey, by the way, it does with Varus. Like, there's ways to get there. Anyway, we're going off topic. So, what's actually happening is all of your basic abilities, which really, to be fair, is QW and E. QE and actually W, because W has a cooldown when you activate it for bonus damage. All of these are now getting a cooldown refresh based on the number of Blight stacks popped on champions and on Dragon, Baron, Rift Herald. So that's pretty cool. Overall, they're also making the Q damage scale the percent health damage on the W. So Q technically loses its cooldown if it detonates Blight. However, it gets the cooldown back at detonating Blight based on stat count. So this looks pretty interesting. And then the R moves slower. So let's just break them down. I think a more easy way to do it is this. So this is Varus, and in 10.23, which is the current live patch, Varus was maxing W second. In 10.24, I'm going to assume he maxes W last. So assuming that change is happening, here is Varus' auto attack damage before and after. It, of course, ends -10. If you wanted to bridge this gap a little bit, you could, of course, max W second and still get this a bit closer. But I'm going to assume you don't do that because the damage scales from 9 to 15% max health, which doesn't seem like that good of a scaling. I know E's rank up isn't great either, but I'm still going to assume you max E second. Regardless, it is a, moderate attack damage nerf overall to Varus, but his base AD is still pretty good. Then we go into the QW. So this is cooldown change, okay? This is the cooldown change assuming you are popping 3 stacks of Blight. Now, the base cooldown of Q is 18 to 10, and then was reduced by 3 seconds if you popped Blight. This is now, I'm going to assume, is reduced by 36% just straight up, which means that is a very big big buff, a big decrease to the early cooldown of Q, and then less so later on. Now, keep in mind, again, the base cooldown is 10 seconds. You would have to get all 3 stacks blown up for this to be a buff at level 9, because getting 2.4 seconds would make this 7.6, which is, of course, larger than 7. Quick maths. But assuming we are popping 3 stacks, we're getting this. What's also worth pointing out is you are getting this even if I'm reading this right, even if the E is what pops the stacks. So you can, auto, 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 Q, auto, 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 E, and then you're back in it for auto, 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 Q. So in some cases, your cooldown is not reduced by 36%, but by 72%, and your cooldown might actually be 2.8 seconds. Because you pop with Q, then you pop with E. Maybe. I'm not saying for sure this is the case, but it's certainly a possibility and seems to be the intended gameplay pattern. Now, these buffs seem gigantic. This buff is really, really big. Let's keep in mind, this is basically a strict buff to Q cooldown. In the long run, over the course of playing a game of League of Legends, actually, I will say one thing. This is actually very, very meaningful that I don't want to overlook. I don't play a lot of Varus because I don't play dog champions. I'm pretty sure this was a refund if you hit minions or not. This refund only happens if you're hitting champions or epic monsters. So the auto the minions, Q through the cannon, get 3 seconds back in your Q, that part is gone. And that is relevant. That is meaningful. It definitely is meaningful. However, again, the fact that you can get your Q cooldown back by simply using your E to blow up stacks on a champion, which is easy, is a big deal. And again, you can refresh your Q and your E based on this cooldown mechanic. That is a really, 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 really big deal. Of course, the math on what is your E refresh, well, it's really easy. It's 36% less per triple stack. So that's just the numbers outright. But this seems to be that we're going into a more slightly hybridy Varus spot. And now I think we're finally, I like the design. I want to be clear. I absolutely love the design work done on Varus. Absolutely love it. Because I think it's a little bit like what happened with Master Yi 7 years ago or whatever, where they kind of merged the play style and made Varus a complete champion. Right? And this is the big deal. They made Varus probably a complete champion because now your kit actually works well together. Big improvements in champion design. What's funny is I believe Varus may have been the first champion Meddler did. And he now is I'm gonna get the term wrong, but he's the overall lead of League of Legends design now or something like that. I forget exactly, but he's this is one of his very, very first champions. And it's now been reworked enough where it still has the identity, but it's just been done better. And he got to oversee that project, sort of. I believe I'm right about all these facts. I could be wrong, but whatever. We're going rambly here. I don't know why, just we are. Anyway, I want to be clear. I love the design of this because the idea of getting 3 stacks using one spell, getting 3 stacks using another spell, getting 3 stacks using the next spell. If we're right about this cooldown actually being 28% of the initial cooldown and just being this low, if these are actually your cooldowns, they're 3 seconds long, you actually now want to build attack speed on caster Varus because you are really, really doing the auto, auto, auto Q, auto, auto, auto E, auto, auto, auto Q, auto, auto, auto E. I'm sure you could make a dubstep remix of this, but that's really, really good. That is really, really good. The kit flows well together. You have constant uptime in your abilities. You don't feel bad about just jamming your Q and AFKing. Now full lethality Varus is really, really, really missing out by not using Blighted Quiver stacks. On hit Varus is really missing out by not just getting those Q and E spams out there. This feels good. I like this. This puts us in a good spot. I think this is really, really nice. Now the final nerf is, of course, you cannot R and then flash to reorient your ultimate. And the ultimate itself moves quite a bit slower. This is pretty reactable. This is a pretty substantial cut, right? It's 1/4 slower. That's quite meaningful. You have 1/3 more time to react to the missile now, which is a lot. That means a lot. So yes, this is a nerf. Yes, this is a nerf. But I am quite confident that the other half I didn't talk about, by the way, is if you charge up your Q, Blight deals more damage. The percent health damage goes up even more as well, even on top of the W active doing missing health damage. There's going to be some really, really, really big Q snipes here. And so that's this. This is Q damage max charge. And again, I am assuming you're going to switch over and max W last and still max Q first for good reason. And so, of course, in the first 7 levels of the game, there would be no change to your W rank anyway, and you're simply just getting max health damage out of the W, right? And times 1.5, so increased damage here. Even as we're putting more and more points, we're losing points in W because we're maxing E second instead, and we're not even realizing these gains in the spreadsheet here. We're up to rank 3 W. We're up to rank 4 W here, and it's exactly the same damage. Right? Rank 4 W is identical to rank 1 W with 50% bonus damage. It's like, we're good. Like, this is great. We still feel really, really comfortable. Very briefly, we hit rank 5 W before we start putting points into it, and then we're back up on top. So, I mean, we can realistically just ditch that skill entirely. Now, again, the fact that our W damage is being increased is an incentive to go back and max W anyway. Because, even though the difference goes up by, a little bit, it's only going up by, 1.5% max health per rank up. Well, it's really going up by 2.25% max health per rank up. That's not bad. So you can make that consideration for yourself. It may well be that W max second is correct. I'm going to assume it's E, though, for more cooldowns to get your Qs back up, and then your Es back up, and then more jamming. But either way, Varus' builds will change a lot. He is objectively far more powerful, and this is an exciting set of changes. I'm really big about it. All right, we spent a lot of time in those last two champions. Let's move on a little bit faster. I think this is good to do. Honestly, I am a fan of the fact that, right, saying, hey, by the way, no, Yasuo and Yone, you do not get to just like build Rageblade and obviously ditch your crit. This is unfortunate because, I mean, it's the right choice. I want to be clear about that. But it's kind of unfortunate because you're still kind of screwed either way, because this just means that Rageblade on Yasuo and Yone are never viable. To be clear about what this change is, Way of the Wanderer now waits until other effects are done before doubling crit, so you can't get, 80 or 90 damage per 20 crit out of a Rageblade. You're getting the 40 or 45. And if you don't go Rageblade, then yes, it's actually 40% crit chance. I mean, certainly, like, it was pretty busted. So yeah, necessary change. I'm sure a lot of Yasuo players did not want to have to go Rageblade every game. It probably felt very bad, so I think it's a good change that's happening at all. But it also means that Rageblade cannot be viable. I legitimately believe it wouldn't be that hard to do, I don't think, to have Rageblade ask for your crit damage. Like, simply multiply, do whatever the math actually has to be, because it might not be this clean. Just multiply Rageblade's on hit damage by the champion's inherent crit damage modifier. So in the case of, Jhin and Senna, minus 14%. In the case of Yasuo and Yone, I'm not sure what it is exactly. In fact, they may not even have that going on. I'm not sure. Now that, base crit damage is 1.75 anyway. I'm actually not certain. Like, to be clear, I'm actually not certain if Yasuo and Yone even have crit damage modifiers anymore. They might not, and then I'm just kind of barking up the wrong tree. I think it's correct, though. Because basically, yeah, skipping your crit damage modifier by just buying a different item feels a little cheap, but it's also really messed up just because the reason they're getting this is because they want them to get their max crit chance, right? They're like, no. We want you guys to reach max crit chance so you can crit all the time, because that's the intended synergy. Like, we know crit items are really tough to build on melee champions. We're going to solve that by making you only have to build 2 or 3 of them. So we're going to bribe you. Like, the math is still positive, right? The Cloak of Agility is still better on Yasuo than it is on Ashe. It's still better on him than it is on Jhin or Samir or whatever. Like, let's go. Your Q crits, it's going to be great. Like, go for it. It's fine. And then people are like, actually, what's really broken? It's not even taking the crit damage modifier nerf. And like, yeah, okay. Because, like, to be clear, and the reason why I like this is because there were no choices. You had to go Rageblade. There were not other choices out there. And compare this to like Kai'Sa. I really, really like Kai'Sa. I think Kai'Sa is super well designed, especially for like mass theory crafting players, because you can just say, hey, look, you're playing Kai'Sa. Okay. How do you want to get 100 bonus AD? Is it Essence Reaver? Is it Muramana? Is it Serrated Dirk Reaver? Is it Reaver into Rageblade? Is it Infinity Edge? What are you building? go for it. Make your choice, right? And then do you want to go more into AP? Do you want to go more into AD? You've already got some AP. Deathcap's not that bad. Nash is not that bad. What do you want to do? Do you want to skip it entirely? Because if you don't care about W poke, like that's a really well done like item interaction gameplay thing. And yeah, sure, people figure it out and then people will just follow the leader and that's just gonna happen. This is the opposite of that. It's like, are you Yasuo or Yone? Go Rageblade or you're bad. And not in the way that like Kog'Maw feels good about Rageblade because you're like, oh, I have an on-hit thing. I want more on hits, let's do it. It's not the same. This is you got this cool crit passive. No, never crit. So fan of this. These are definitely pretty big nerfs. Oh, well, let's move on. So now we go to the second half of this patch, which is item changes. So Blade of the Rune King costs 100 more gold and gives 5 less attack speed. Here we go. Let's go get blinded a fair bit. And here's the item efficiency as a result. Definitely goes down quite a bit. I will say, though, in general, this is still a fairly efficient item. This is still going to feel pretty good overall. There's a pretty good chance that 12% lifesteal should cost more than 450 gold, especially now that lifesteal works on hit effects and such. So, you know, it is stronger with things like Kog'Maw W. But, yeah, overall, still a pretty solid item, still worth buying. I know they're intending to nerf it for ranged champions more than melee ones. In general, attack speed is more usable on ranged champions than melee because you have more access to attack more often. It's also why it can be 60% of the on-hit effect and still do more damage total because you're going to use the on-hit effect far more often. Overall, yeah. I also want to point out, by the way, that Blade of the Rune King was, I would say, strictly buffed for ranged champions when they made the active work at your attack range and not at 450. Made it a really, really big deal there. Also, of course, far easier to attack 3 times as Ashe, or, okay, let's pick a real champion who's going to build Rune King Kog'Maw, than it is on Jax, where Jax might have to use his Counter-Strike to get in there and, you know, all this other stuff. So, yep, Rune King nerf, sure. And a lot of Rune King stuff are, and apparently it's overperforming, right? I trust their data. They're using a lot of data to just say what is doing too well. Okay, we nerf those. Let's get the items into a mathematically, you know, at least player behavior-wise, like a balanced state, so that if this is balanced, then players have options. And I would say, in terms of itemization, if your item choices are within about 1% win rate of each other, you've got real choice, because that is sometimes within margin of error, but it's also within margin of, well, this game is different from the average game. You know, if Kraken Slayer and Shield Bow, or Blade of the Rune King and Lord Dominik's, or whatever and whatever, are close in win rate, you can say, well, this game has Rammus and an armor stacking Riven to fight Darius, and this game has a health stacking Darius and a Dr. Mundo who's rushing Warmogs. Armor pen, health damage. Like, if they're close in average win rate, that means you can make those choices and you don't just have to cookie cutter. So I am always a fan of Riot really, really trying to balance the items. Good stuff. Cosmic Drive gets 5 more AP. This item always kind of looked pretty appealing, but also, by the way, I want to point out that I updated my ability haste to actually be 25 per point because we're actually paying for it. So it's going to make all these haste items look more efficient because that's what we're actually paying for the stats anyway. But yeah, health, AP, ability haste, pretty efficient overall, about 100% efficient as a stat stick, which is good. And then haste, some move speed. Move speed is always overly cheap as a stat, but should still be pretty solid overall as an item. So that looks pretty wonderful. Demonic Embrace, losing a little bit of max health burn damage. We're just kind of showing this here so you can see just the efficiency values. You are paying a fair bit for the burn. Obviously, pretty reasonable overall, though. This is just doing 10 armor and 10 MR, by the way. Gets us right there, but obviously the burn damage is very meaningful as well. And yeah, that's going to be an important part of this game. Still a good item, right? All I can really say is it's still a very, very good item. But they're saying, hey, we have data that says Demonic Embrace, Nashers, and Lichbane are all dominating. They are always what everyone buys for second item. They're just simply too good, so we're taking them down a little bit. Every mage always just buys one of these 3. If you always buy one of those 3, then there's no real choices anyway. And so, yeah, absolutely. These items just simply are too good. Take them down a little bit. Right, bumping up Cosmic Drive. Now it's maybe more of an option as your second item. That's kind of cool as well. Eclipse gets further nerfed from 6-12 to 8-16 for melee ranged. Eclipse definitely is the best performing assassin mythic. Obviously, it's getting poached on things like Jhin because you can just like auto queue someone, and that's going to feel really good. It gives you kiting because of all the move speed. Really, really substantial. Right, it's double. The range cooldown is actually really meaningful now at this point. 16 seconds is quite a lot. That's fine. If it gets used, whatever. But I think pretty reasonable nerf overall. Ember Knife and Hail Blade. Okay, and in here we have clips here real quick. Reasonably efficient item. Obviously, these are quite strong. 4% armor pen per mythic, pretty good stuff. But let's talk about the fact that Ember Knife and Hail Blade now um, have full Omni Vamp, including AoE damage. Just the overall vamp is down slightly. So if you are a pure single target champion, this is a weaker item, right? I can't think of any champion that does like literally no AoE. Even like Tryndamere and Master Yi like press their spinny buttons and hit the entire camp a little bit. But I will say that this is a buff to any sort of tank champion who is using their actually Mundo wouldn't be a good example because Mundo is very very single target. Like his W exists, but like it's really all about his Q and his E auto attacks. But like Rammus using Spike Shell, Amumu's crying and everything. Like this is an Amumu buff specifically. He's gonna be like a lot healthier as a result of this. Because keep in mind, it's 1/3 effective, right? So 4% Omnivamp becomes 10% Omnivamp. You're getting 2.5x the healing on someone like Karthus or Lilia, who deal, exclusively AoE damage. Now, in the case of Nidalee, her ranged Q, her melee Q, her W trap as well, all of those are single target. It's only Pounce and Swipe that are AoE, so Nidalee's not getting as much here. Thinking about other, mage junglers. Not that Talia is any good right now, but her Q is single target. Her W and E are AoE. But yeah, if you are doing substantial AoE damage, and which almost all mages are, if you're playing jungle brand, your Q and maybe your passive. I'm not sure how your passive will be coded actually, because it's only on one target, but you can apply it to multiple things. It's probably single target. But your Q, and then depending on how they code the E, but probably an overall vamp buff for brand, because your W is most of your damage if you're going to play jungle brand for whatever reason. In general, this should be health up for these champions. And I also want to point out, by the way, that I saw a lot of comments online, and it's the same for Hellblade, by the way, that, oh my gosh, wow, Riot's just buffing tank junglers. Tank junglers weren't dying in the jungle anyway. Yeah, they're going to get more health than before, but like, you still can't go over 100%. Karthus and Lilia and co actually need the durability. They're going to have actually a pretty hard time. So my read is that this will, certainly it will buff tank junglers some, and outside of Amumu, no tank junglers are getting any nerfs this patch. Aside from, again, the Sunfire Aegis and stuff, buffs from, or nerfs from the last micro patch. But mages are gaining substantially. Are mages going to be in a good spot yet? I don't think so, especially because their mythics are also getting nerfed. But we had champions like Fiddlesticks, who is at full health regardless of Omnivamp, doing fine, right? The champs who could stay at full health didn't really get screwed that much. The other champions really did. So we'll see how well this works. Next up, Essence Reaver gets 10 attack damage. Yeah, this is one thing we talked about with 2 days ago. I released a video about AD carry itemization and how is it going? Do they do as much damage as before? Whatnot. And one of the big things is a lot of the spellcasting AD carries who really only care about raw attack damage felt like they got nerfed in 1024 because they lost a bunch of AD and Mana Restore and they got Spellblade. And Spellblade's Mana Restore is okay. It's probably not as good, although this would be a longer discussion to a certain degree. It would take some more time. But the big thing is your spells just did less damage. Like, why would you go Essence Reaver when you can build items with enough attack damage to care about? Spending 3,000 gold on a BF sword feels really bad. Old Essence Reaver, for reference, had 70 attack damage on it. That went to 40. And so champions trying to replace their old item with a new item felt bad because you'd play Sivir, and you'd cast Ricochet, and your first target would take 100 more damage. And then the other targets would all take 30 less AD times everything. And your Q did 30 less AD times everything. And it's like, well, feels bad. Now, certainly other items exist, like Navori Quick Blades. There's a lot more items in the caster crit marksman suite. I would say these champions still don't have the crit scaling I would have liked to see on them. Like, I want to see more things go the way of Tristana E and whatnot, where there's a crit ratio and Anxiety, where there's a crit ratio on the abilities, because again, this is the other version of solving this. I know I'm going back off topic, but I did a video, I think 2 years ago, about how I would fix crit marksman. And it was basically saying, slap, pickaxes, on all of the AD carry items. They can keep getting attack damage throughout their builds. The other, and actually in retrospect, better version of this is to put crit chance ratios on all their abilities, so that when Sivir buys her Zeal, or Xayah buys her Zeal or whatever, or even Jinx buys her Zeal for Hurricane, that crit damage and crit chance feeds into the ability and keeps the ability scaling up. But when you're playing, and to be fair, I literally haven't bought SG for this patch. When you buy your Caulfield's Warhammer and then buy your crit cloak and then just like buy your combine and just like and wait for your gold, you are not gaining, like, from Caulfield's Warhammer onwards, you are not getting any Q damage for any component at all until finally combine, and it gets 15 AD. And that's all you got. And it's like, that feels really, really bad for someone like Sivir who wants their Q to be meaningful, and it just troughs for so long. And contrast that with, what's okay, sure. Now, in some cases, if you're buying Demonic Embrace second, you're buying a big old, what is it? You're buying a giant spelt in the middle of that combine, and then you're spending another 1,000 on the combine. But at least you're getting like the Blasting on one side and the Amp Tome on the other, and then you're moving on. Like, just it feels like mage itemization is more piecemeal. I mean, compared to assassin itemization, where you're getting like Caulfield's Warhammer and Duskblade, and then you combine to get something else that's cool, and you're going for Eclipse, and you get your Dusk, and you get your Vamp Scepter, and then I forget what the other piece is, but who cares? Maybe it's like a pickaxe or something, and then it goes into the combine, and you're like, yeah, every item I buy feels good. When you're building towards Shield Bow, it's like, here's my Noon Quiver, here's my Vamp Scepter, here's my Cloak of Agility, yeah, I'm auto-attacking. When you're building towards Rage Blade, like, here's my Rage Knife, here's my Recurve Bow. It's like, this all feels great. And then you build Essence Reaver and you're like, I built a Cloak of Agility, and it did nothing. That's the part that I take issue with, and that is why I would love, if there's a product down the line, that Riot could add some crit ratios to these spells. Yes, it requires rebalancing, but we are very clearly stat binding Sivir as an auto attacker who cares about spell damage. And Spellblade is kind of not that, unfortunately. Xayah isn't kind of the same way. Like, the old Essence Reaver champions did get kind of hurt in the itemization. They need to get modernized. I think they need crit ratios on their spells. Now, to be fair, Xayah does have that, right? Xayah E has a crit ratio on it. That's a good thing. We've done a lot. We've done a lot of sidetrack rambles in this video. We've done a lot of them. We might do some more. Kraken Slayer gets very, very big buffs. Kraken Slayer definitely in the average game was weaker than Shield Bow. Now, I will say, again, item to item, Kraken Slayer builds did more auto attack damage than Infinity Edge builds pre-patch. Again, caster 80 carries did not get the same replacements, but auto attack 80 carries actually had Kraken Slayer stand up well against IE builds. That is just actually true. They really did stack up just fine. That said, Kraken Slayer was just worse than Shield Bow. And so in practice, AD carries all dealt a whole lot of less damage because you had to go Shield Bow, and you were more durable, and that was nice, but that meant that you built Shield Bow, and your first Mythic had like 50 attack damage and 15 attack speed on it, and you're like, I don't do anything. True statement. So, pretty big buff. Kraken Slayer gets 5 AD, and a really big deal, the true damage ratio goes up by 0.15. Now, I'll take another quick tangent to talk about my video yesterday about Kraken Slayer versus Blade of the Ruin King. Yes, I was wrong about Kraken Slayer. I looked at the item sets in the League client, and they said 80 damage, so I copied that over and assumed it was 80 damage. It is not. It was 60 damage. So one, admitting that mistake, but two, it does not matter what that number was. The point of that video, I know we're not talking about the patch anymore, but that video was saying, no matter what those numbers are, which one scales better in the late game? And flat true damage scaled better against items that were built. Is there more going on? Yes, of course. But I read the Reddit comments on that video, and it was a lot of people who never watched the video and never watched the conclusion and was like, Kraken Slayer does 60 damage XD. And it's like, that's not the point of the video. True damage. So I will summarize that for those who didn't watch the video, okay? People have been saying that Kraken Slayer is not a good anti-tank item because who cares about flat true damage? That is incorrect. In isolation, and there's an asterisk, in isolation, against tanks, champions like Shen and Amumu and Leona, flat true damage scales better than percent health physical damage. You could remake Blade of the Ruin King, and it's 4% max health physical damage. Kraken Slayer, before even including the AD ratio, outscales Blade of the Ruin King, or similar, right? Outscales Kog'Maw W if Kog'Maw W is physical, assuming the same amount of armor comes in as MR or whatever, right? Like MR and armor is a weird topic as well. So I want to be really clear about something. Flat true damage, even if it doesn't scale in any way, outscales percent health damage. Kraken Slayer, despite not looking like it, and this is a fault of, again, tooltips not being exciting. It's why I've talked about tooltips a lot more in the last year, because there's this very common misconception that flat true damage is somehow not good against tanks when it is better than percent health damage everyone thinks is better against tanks. So just want to get that out there. Let's move on, though. Kraken Slayer is an anti-tank item. It is very good at that. It is just an overall weaker item. So it gets 5 more AD. So does the Ornn upgrade version, because of course. And the big thing is it scales even farther into late game. So here's our numbers on Kraken Slayer. Now, of course, the item actually dealt 78 damage when you bought it because it had 60 AD with a 0.3 AD ratio. Meant it was 78, so 78 out of the box with 30% of your other items going in, which meant, yes, it was functionally 80 damage on hit, but whatever. Either way, Kraken Slayer is now 89 damage on hit, right? So it's an 11 damage increase out of the box before runes and before Doran's Blade. And of course, the ratio itself is also 50% higher. Getting another 100 bonus AD, not unreasonable. We're at 135 damage on, every fourth hit or third hit. So very, very substantial buff to Kraken Slayer. This will be extremely felt. This will be extremely, extremely felt. This is, I would say, a very big buff to Rageblade champions. Because keep in mind, right, if you're building Kraken Slayer, your Master Yi, doing Rageblade stuff, or you're someone else doing Rageblade stuff, you're Kog'Maw doing Rageblade stuff, maybe you're Ashe doing Rageblade stuff, or, you're like Jinx or Caitlyn or something who's not going to go Rageblade. Because you'd rather crit because it's better, and it is. This damage, as far as I can tell, does not crit. Maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't. I wouldn't hate the idea of it having a crit ratio. I'm just going to start talking about crit ratios for the next 6 months now, apparently. But this damage does not crit. What it does scale off of is attack speed and bonus on hit effects. Now, it's interesting. I want to point out something. As I believe... No, I actually don't know. There's something about on attack versus on hit effects. I forget which one is which. So I know what an on attack effect is versus an on hit effect. There's an item in the game right now that behaves differently as on attack versus on hit. I think it's Rageblade. It's like every third attack applies on hits twice, and then it like for melee, it's like I don't know. I know I'm losing my brain entirely here. Someone in the comments will definitely tell me what it is. There is an item with a melee range disparity that is on attack versus on hit, and I forget which one it is. I don't think it's Rageblade. I don't think Kraken Slayer interacts with it, but there is something going on, and I've completely forgot what it was, so I'm sorry for this diatribe that went nowhere. Either way, substantial buff to Kraken Slayer, very gold efficient. This is a lot of damage. This should be very meaningful. This should be very good. Liandry's Anguish. It is too strong, especially for mages that can consistently apply its damage over time effects, reducing the AP ratio to pull back some late game power. So I want to point out that I actually really hate a lot of these items here that have AP ratios on them. And I actually really even more hate things like Night Harvester, where it's like the item has a base damage. So like we have Luden's Tempest, which has a 100 flat base damage and an AP ratio on it. We have Night Harvester with a scaling base damage and also an AP ratio on it. And I don't know why that needs to be the case. It's like, to me, I see it in the sense that they want to make sure that when you buy the item, it feels relevant, and then late game, it should still feel relevant. And I get that. And, when you compare like Victor Q, by the time you build Luden's Tempest, you've got like rank 2 Victor Q. But then by level 13, you're going to have rank 5 Victor Q. But Victor Q also has an AP ratio. So like spells scale up with level and also with AP ratio. So why can't items? And I don't know. It feels, for whatever reason, it feels wrong to me. I don't know why it feels wrong. I have a hard time putting words to it, but I don't like items that scale and then also scale. I don't know. Like for whatever reason, it feels wrong. And I'll go and talk about other items that I think do this well, and I'm fine with it. Like I'm kind of okay with Kraken Slayer, to be honest. But also it doesn't scale with level and then also AD. It just scales with one or the other. And I think that's kind of the better version. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why it is like this. I just kind of do instinctively for some reason. Either way, this is a a flat damage on your AP ratio. Liandry's Anguish has percent health damage, has flat damage, and has an AP ratio for more flat damage. It is kind of the inverse movement with a flat AP and then an AP for or with flat damage, health damage, and AP into health damage. This is flat damage, health damage, and AP into flat damage. So that ratio has been nerfed by 40%. Here is Liandry's Anguish before and after. Basically, the flat damage is 17. It's now 16. This ratio is not high anyway. Like, it's a pretty meaningless ratio in the first place. I assume the flat damage is there to make it feel like good against minions or whatever. Sure, whatever, fine, who cares? They really probably could have just done away with a lot of it and, I don't know, sharpened the item and just said, no, it's really just the percent health burn item. Like, the fact that it has a flat burn and the flat burn scales like betrays the point of the item. Like I'm kind of not sure why they unsharpened it, to be honest. I don't know. Like it kind of doesn't make sense to me why the item that is clearly meant to be the anti-tank version, or at least the long team fight version. And maybe it's because they want to be the long team fight version, not the anti-tank version. And they're like, actually, no. Like, we want this to be good in all fights if you're just gonna brawl for a while. And because you're brawling for a while, you're probably like Rumble or something, so you're probably, maybe landing against Maokai top. So, have some percent health damage, but, the health damage is not the star of the show, and it's why the Mythic Passive is ability haste and not percent magic pen. It's why the scaling is on the flat damage. Like, that may well be the thing. But it's literally called Liandry's, and people think of Liandry's as the anti-tank item that you buy for the percent health burn. Like, when I'm looking at my first item, it's like, well, Everfrost is complete trash. That item is completely horrible. It is not worth buying in any case ever. So I'm buying Luden's, which is flat damage and flat magic pen, or Liandry's with percent health damage burn. Like, I am being told, choose one extreme or the other, which is fine. I actually like that. It makes the items sharply different. I go into a game with tanks and squishies, and I'm like, I'm going to choose to just be weaker against tanks by going Luden's. Instead of buying this item with flat damage on it, where it's like, oh, it's actually still good against Vel'Koz. I don't like that. When I buy Shield Bow, I'm crap against tanks. When I buy Kraken Slayer, I get no durability. I see tanks and assassins. I have to pick one. Mages don't? I don't know. Not a huge fan. Next up, though, we get Lichbane. And I want to point out, I love new Lichbane. So, new Lichbane, they did a couple things to it. It's actually the second nerf since the patch. Number one, they made the base AD ratio much higher, which I am a very big fan of, because it allows you to realize your Lichbane dreams earlier on into the game, because the base AD can carry the damage output. I am a huge fan of Lichbane being a big ticket, 3,000 gold item with good upfront damage regardless of your build. I'm a fan of that. But it meant that the AP ratio was 0.6, then hotfixed to 0.5, and now in this patch is 0.4. The cooldown on Lichbane is also longer at 2.5 and not 1.5, which actually I think makes sense because it lines up with what mages kind of want to do. It allows it to be more damage, it's a little bit burstier. Obviously the cooldown though is longer. And they're saying, hey, we're toning it down because it's doing too well in the late game. So what's interesting is they're still trying to preserve Lichbane being a solid second item. Now, it was the highest win rate second item. You'd buy it second, you'd spike with it, and then it would carry on into the late game. So what this is kind of doing is that you can buy Lichbane second and spike with it, but it will relatively slightly decay. Keep in mind, Lichbane in current patch, let's look at Lichbane in 10.24 compared to 10.22. It now has the exact same AP ratio as 10.22. Stat profile is fairly similar. It's overall a roughly similar item, but all that's changed since 10.22 to now is the cooldown is longer and the base AD ratio doubled. And I think Lichbane is still a better item overall as a result. The cooldown change, honestly, not that meaningful in general. The base AD ratio allowing you to buy it early is a good thing. So let's dissect new Lichbane. So this is using Victor as our example Lichbane user, because he's going to queue auto and it's going to be pretty easy. So, Lichbane in 10.22, 10.23, and 10.24. We're going to use level 9 as our starting snapshot because you're going to buy a Mythic first. then you're going to buy Lich Bane, and level 9 is a pretty early time for your first legendary, but let's just pick it, okay? So 10.22. In fact, the AP ratio is lower. I got that one wrong. 0.75 plus half your ability power. And we're going to use 160 AP as our example because we have 80 AP for our Mythic and 80 AP roughly for our Lich Bane. Is it exactly the right numbers? Probably not, but we're just picking an example number because who cares? And this was the damage that old Lich Bane dealt. As we gained levels, it of course increased slightly. 135 became 158. And then we had the very start of patch 10.23, the very, very start before any hotfixes happened. And wow, was that a big power spike difference. I mean, look how much more damage Lich Bane dealt. 135 became 206. Technically, yes, we could actually do, 1.75 because it's using our total AD, so we're obviously auto-attacking with it. In fact, we maybe should. So, this is maybe 2.5. It's not really to change that much, but this is probably the more accurate set of numbers here because you're actually auto-attacking. So this is what your Lich Bane Empowered Auto does in total. And then we go here and we look at post-nerf and we say, well, post-nerf, right? Compare 10.22 to 10.24. Okay? How are we doing? And it's like, well, actually, pretty well. Right? Current world Lich Bane compared to post world Lich Bane, 2 patches down the line, we still do about 20% more damage. The AP ratio is 0.4 here when it was 0.5 there. The AP ratio is lower than before, but the total AD goes from 1.75 because we have to auto attack to 2.5, and look at us. We're doing a lot more damage than before the patch. All right, what about later on in the game? What about 600 ability power? We're like mostly the late game now. And again, we're going to fix these numbers because it's, I think, more reasonable to do so. It's 1.75, it's 2.5, it's 2.5. But even in a later game scenario where you've got 600 ability power, you're in there, you're on a solid, 4, maybe even 5 items, depending on if it's death cap. It is still more damage than 10.22. And again, I want to say I like this. It broadened the Lich Bane market. I am a fan of broadening the Lich Bane market and saying, look, you can buy this early and spike with it, and it should feel good. 1.5 extra total attack damage on top, still a fairly reasonable AP ratio, like solid 500 damage Lich Bane proc. This should still feel reasonable, and I think it does. So yes, of course, as you can see compared to here, it's obviously a nerf down the line. I mean, duh, the ratio went down, of course, as a nerf down the line. But it is overall a better item than pre season 2020. It is a stronger item. It is, it's not got mana on it, so you don't get screwed if you're playing Vladimir. More champions can totally consider using a Lich Bane. I think it's a good thing. And you can buy it earlier because the total AD ratio can carry it. That's a good thing. Luden's Tempest is getting half the move speed, and again, the echo damage ratio is going down. I want to point out that this is the old AP ratio. It was 100 plus 0.1. It's now back to 100 plus 0.1, so for whatever reason, just putting the numbers in, because the item, of course, itself has his AP, so 112 becomes 108. That's the math there, so great, good job. Technically, that could be a gold efficiency thing. Of course, the move speed is lower. The magic pen, of course, is very, very good. Yeah, Luden's still a good item. I mean, AP champions should feel good about their items because they're good, and we can move on. Moonstone Renewer, massive, massive, massive buff. So bug fixing, you can now heal an ally who is in combat, and if you're not, so if you're staying back on like Sonnen, pressing W, or, Soraka heals, or, Nami buffs or whatever, you can at least start getting you can get this stacking mechanic to keep going. So that's a good thing. But also, the actual healing itself is massively improved. So 30 to 60 becomes 60 to 90. It doesn't multiply quite as hard, but the math is still way great. So the ability, like the item practically doubled. Now, once again, I really wish the designers would not have Mythics scale at level 1. I would like them to pick numbers that actually exist. Because again, saying, oh, look, 30 becomes 60. They doubled the item. No, they literally never doubled the item. Also, 60 becomes 90 is also fraudulent because you're going to be never level 18 on support, basically ever, right? Even though like really absurd, like triple inhib down, defend forever, that kind of ends at 16. But whatever, we cut out the first 5 levels. A level 6 mythic is maybe doable on support, so that's where I'm starting the numbers. And here you go. Baseline, very, very substantial heal increase, right? 70%, that is a really big deal. You're certainly going to get free 9. Like, it's definitely coming in around like one of these levels, basically. Probably not at 5. That probably feels a bit early, but you're getting it pretty early on. Yeah, this is going to feel pretty good. You're going to enjoy this. This is a really big buff. How about the stacking, right? Because it stacks over time, maximum plus 150%. Now it's maximum plus 100%. Still a buff. Still a pretty sizable buff, right? 97 to 150 becomes 138 to 180. Still a very large buff. Moonstone Renewer is a lot more powerful. I want to point out one thing about Moonstone Renewer. This was taken from a Reddit thread, but I think it's pretty meaningful. It's not going to be done that much, but it's a possibility. Moonstone Renewer is not necessarily a healing item for enchanters. It can be a healing item for any support, because as long as you're in combat, you're healing someone. That can just be useful as Leona, because you're going to sit in the front line for a while. You've got Aftershock on. You're going to be around, and you're going to help heal your frontliner or whatever. Like, if you're going to have a really hard time peeling, yeah, you may just go lock it, don't get me wrong. But if you are going to live in the fight for a while, and, the fight's going to be slow enough, there is an argument to be made that Moonstone Renewer can eventually outpace lock it. And I think it's kind of why the item doesn't have heal and shield power. It's why the stats on it are a little bit champion agnostic, because you can kind of choose this on Zyra or Brand or something, and just maybe. I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but like, it was a cool thought and I wanted to bring it up. Nashor's Tooth, overperforming a little bit. Mostly it's Kale overperforming, but Nashor's Tooth, we're just going to go and look at it. And yep, still a very good item overall. It's more than 100% gold efficient. Now that doesn't have ability haste on it. It's just here's ability power, here's attack speed. But the more you sharpen an item, the better you make it for its best users, right? The more you sharpen an item, the more you can be like, I'm playing Victor, and I'm sitting here autoing tanks a lot in team fights. Like, we've got really heavy frontline on both sides. Maybe I'll just go Nashor's Tooth. I mean, it's 100 AP. That's more AP than I'm getting in any other item I buy. It's more than I'm getting on Rylays. And I mean, I could go Rylays and upgrade my slow from 20 to 30%, but whatever. But, for the same cost, I can get a bunch of attack speed and a bunch of on-hit damage. Now, realistically, Nashor's Tooth is coming in, actually not in all cases, because for AP Twitch, for example, it's most commonly built first. But again, we roll in the AP ratio into the item itself. Nashor's Tooth goes from dealing baseline 40 damage plus 25% of bonus AP beyond Nashor's to doing 35 innately and 20% of bonus AP beyond the first. That's how the math works out. Yeah, I mean, obviously we can still see from the gold values. If you want ability power and attack speed, it's still a very, very efficient item. Is quite good. Totally worth going for on these AP auto attackers. Just they're less OP. Okay, fine. Night Harvester, sadly, has an AP ratio still. It is losing 50 flat damage on the damage coming in. Once again, Night Harvester is an item that does not come in the first 5 levels of the game, and yet it scales. So this item, despite having 125 base damage, in fact, doesn't. It has 167 base damage, 168 base damage. And it just makes, like, it's just, I don't know, I want tooltips to tell the truth. I want an item that already scales the level to not just also scale with AP for kind of no reason. Like, I don't know why it needs to scale up both. I don't really get it. Because you can kind of just, like, okay, there is like practical gains in terms of like, if you're a low AP champion because you have to go Zonias and Void Staff and Banshees and whatever, don't worry, it still scales. So, it's not just an early game spiking item and then falls off. Like, that logic I get. And then if you're an AP stacker like Vhagar and you're getting Death Cap and all those things, and, well, don't worry, because that's an AP ratio. It'll keep up. Scaling with level and scaling with AP, it does, in fact, say, hey, we're going to keep up with your item build. And that's true. It is. Like, it is true. It just feels weird when we have items like Trinity Force that don't really, and Eclipse that doesn't. It just, and yeah, okay, it's a max health item, right? So like, it scales by level by virtue of that happening. But I don't know. I would still rather pick one or the other. And honestly, I'd rather just pick level. And I'd also rather they don't scale level 1. Just, right? This is actually, 160 to 250. That's like the actual number on the item, Just, I don't know. That's what I would like to see. You're not really going to have that big of gains in the game itself. Again, these numbers not existing in the game don't change anything. They nerf the item by a flat 50. It doesn't matter when they kick in. It's nerfed by 50 regardless. Just, I would have liked it. Rocket Belt doing something pretty similar. Losing 25 damage in the early game, losing 50 damage in the late game. Certainly they are just doing a lot of high burst overall. AP Mythics are doing a lot of damage. Once again, we start at level 8 because why not? Late game nerfs bigger than the early game nerf. We're feeding in the AP ratio, of course, as well. And what are we at here? 125 to 200 and 175 to 250. So Rocket Belt just does 50 more damage than Night Harvester, but that's fine because Night Harvester can multi-hit and Rocket Belt not nearly as easily. So sure, okay. Also, Rocket Belt was nerfed less than Night Harvester. I assume they're sort of targeting which items are doing the best and nerfing the appropriate amounts. They also didn't group these items because PD is in the middle here and then Riftmaker's down here. They just did it alphabetically, which I get, but also I really would like to see them group them. Oh well. Next up is Phantom Dancer, just simply going to get 200 gold cheaper, and Spectral Waltz is up by 1 second. Yeah, Phantom Dancer was a pretty weak item. It was just enough there. This would be what, 3360. It beat efficiency in the old patch, but because then you had to hit something like 3 or 5 times to get this on. This is pretty rough. So yeah, here we go. Much closer. You still have to get these attacks in for it to be good. This is meant to be kind of a replacement for old Rageblade. I'm glad new Rageblade is just here's your bonus on hits, and here's your crit conversion, and then PD is here's stacking attack speed. You can opt into the weird feeling attack speed ramp thing. It also allows you to build stacking attack speed, and this is a very good DPS item. This is in fact 3,300 gold worth of damage, and hey, move speed's good too, for a pretty reasonable cost. But since PD had no flat damage on it, it was certainly not a good early item. They're saying it's underperforming, especially early on. Yes, of course it is, because it is not a good early item attack speed. You really want, once your other stats are really online, you're mostly desperate to get attack damage in there. But with Kraken Slayer being buffed and things like that, we might see PD get picked up a lot more, especially with it being cheaper. Prowler's Claw gets 5 AD. We can look at its efficiency real quick. Not terrible. You're paying for Sand Swipe and the Mythic passive, which, yep, totally reasonable. But it's we're seeing Eclipse getting nerfed. We're seeing Prowler's Claw getting buffed. That's why it's staying the same. So we'll see those balance levels move a little bit. Riftmaker, overall, getting weakened a little bit. Void Corruption, no longer getting 15% bonus damage, but 10% bonus damage. That, of course, turns into true, which means it's, 30% bonus damage becomes 20% bonus damage. But basically, yep, Kale was a Riftmaker user, did really, really well with that item. So we're seeing a lot of Mage Mythics go down. And, this is going to make AD carries feel a bit better, of course. Keep in mind that we can basically look at the win rate of Caitlyn and Jinx and, other champions. They probably move up a little bit because Kraken Slayer is a viable option. And it can be a good item. We'll see champions like Swain and Karthus and Vhagar and Vel'Koz go down in win rate in bot lane because, again, items are going up for the AD carries, items going down for the mages. That's an easy way to measure how the relative performance is going. Because keep in mind, right, I want to be really clear about something. If AD carries are totally non-viable, you will see exclusively Yasuo and Ziggs in the bot lane, and they will have the highest win rate. What makes it messy, we talked about this earlier, what makes it messy is Yasuo has, the Rageblade shenanigans finally going away, and Ziggs got all his new AP mythics to feel good about. If marksmen are non-viable, you would replace them with another champion. We'd go back to Garen Taric bot lane. Now, I realize people playing bot lane are like, well, I'm going to keep playing the champions that I enjoy playing, and I get that. I, personally, when I ended, my ranked climb in season 2020, I basically two-tricked Ashe and Swain. I played Ashe when we needed engage, we needed utility for the team, and I played Swain when I was going to be under too much threat to survive Malphite or Talon as Ashe. I had very different champions for pretty much any reasonable game state. Both are good laners, have some good poke, have some decent all-in potential, have, good team fighting and okay side lane control to get out and move on. And, Ashe was the best performing marksman and Swain was the best performing mage, and those are the champions that I played. I am happy to play whatever is good. I am a bot laner. Like, I know a lot about how the duo lane works. I know a lot about matchups, but I am personally happy to change my champions around. I don't have to just play the archers. I like all kinds of ranged champions. I'm happy to play mages. Now, that is not everyone. I definitely think that if you want to be able to play sort of the bow and arrow, you should have a champion out there that does that playstyle for you. And that, there should be someone out there viable who auto attacks for a living. Totally agree with that being a possibility. Thankfully, right now, there are champions who are decent as just pure auto attackers. But there are a lot of champions who are doing very poorly as pure auto attackers. All the mage mythics losing power is going to help that. Everfrost, by the way, still a trash item. One for update, and I believe this is a typo in their patch notes. Serpent's Fang is getting 10, not 20 attack damage. Actually, I realized that I'm a dum-dum. So we're going to have to fix our numbers. Because I just realized this is shield river damage, not AD on the item. So we're going to pause, and when you see me again, it's going to be fixed. And we should be back now. Because base 50 becomes base 70. 50 plus 40% of 60 is 50 plus 24. So this is now 70 plus 40% of 60 is 70 plus 24. So there we go. There's our actual numbers. I goofed the first time, my bad. But here's what we got going on. The item is, you are paying for the passive. You aren't paying for the passive. I want to point out that, like, if this was 70 AD, by the way, it would be gold efficient. So, you're losing out on just under 10 raw AD, but you are getting a lot of shield reaver damage. Now, I want to point out something real quick. They're saying, although it's a strong item, it hasn't seen much action, so we're increasing its damage to solidify as a powerful situational choice for assassins. Win rate-wise, Serpent's Fang was good when the comp was there for it. However, it was under-purchased in games where it was there for. I'm in the long run. In the long run, I think this item will have to be nerfed again eventually. I think this is less problematic than a champion being overbuffed, but I'm kind of okay with items being overbuffed to convince people to buy them. Serpent's Fang was successful in games where it was worth buying. This item should be optimal in games where it's worth buying, right? Like, that would make sense to me. If Mortar Reminder was as good as Infinity Edge against Dr. Mundo, why even have Grievous Wounds is kind of a reasonable thought to have, right? Like, there is a best item for every scenario. Serpent's Fang is certainly very sharp in what it's best about. Are they shielding? Yes, but, like, so is Grievous Wounds, and so is, like, Frozen Heart. Like, lots of items are obvious in what they do. That shouldn't be a problem. An item being obvious is okay. I don't think it should be opaque. It should be like, oh, they're really shield heavy. I'm going to go Serpent's Fang. There's a Samira running Bloodthirster and Shield Bow. Well, yeah, let's go Serpent's Fang. Like, and now that it's 70 bonus damage, and in fact, it's 94 bonus damage, and plus with a mythic that's probably doing another 60 AD, I mean, it's really more like, 116 or something, whatever it actually is as you get your other items online. I mean, just with 60 AD, it's, bumped a ton. This should feel really good. You should feel really comfortable buying this, popping shields. It's 100-something bonus damage on every attack, on every spell, on every shield, except for Black Shield. This should be very, very good. Next up, Tear of the Goddess getting pretty substantially buffed. So it is 90 more mana up front, 90 less mana required to stack, which is an 80% time requirement. It takes 20% less time to stack Tear now. Technically, Archangel Staff, it's 90 more mana and 90 less required to stack. Right? Okay, we're right about that one. I'm not trolling. Sorry, I'm just like making sure I'm not like a complete idiot. Yeah, so Archangels comes in with a flat 500, Manamune comes with a flat 500, and because of, this is gaining 100 instead of gaining 90, it means Seraphs and Muramana have 10 more total mana on them. Whatever, it's 10 more mana, who cares? Technically, that feeds into Muramana's on hit damage very, very slightly by like 2. It's like, no, it's 0.2 AD and like 0.4 on hit damage. It's not a big deal. For Seraphs, it's, like 0.01 or something percent more ability power. Like, it's not a huge deal. These aren't important. It's just the fact that At all points in time, even when it's done stacking, you have more mana than before. So you just have a bigger mana pool, period. That's good, of course. And then it stacks 20% faster. That's also very, very good. Um, as far as I could tell, virtually zero champions had tier first buy as highest win rate. Ezreal, Corki, Kog'Maw, things like that. Tier first was not correct. You went for a Doran's Blade or a Doran's Ring, and then you dealt with it afterwards. Um, Also, it meant that you should never have gone Manamune or Archangel's first item. You should always finish your Mythic. Because it was never going to be Muramana or Seraphs on time anyway. So you should just simply go for Divine Sunderer or Trinity Force or Luden's Echo or whatever, because those are just going to be better items for you. So just buy those instead. With Tier being a better first item by just you always have 90 more mana than before, period, done. That is just a fact until the item is fully stacked. This is now a much better item as your first item. You get 3 more Mystic Shots, you get an extra Void Ooze or whatever. Like, this is meaningful. This will change the texture of your lane at least a little bit. You probably still don't start Tier, but you might start Tier. And because you can start Tier and not be trolling, and then as a result of that, you can then upgrade to Muramana much sooner because you started it sooner and it finishes stacking sooner, you might get to go Seraphs or Muramana first item, and then delay your Mythic as a result. And that might be worthwhile. We're probably not there, but that is a possibility. Mid lane minion changes actually existed in the previous patch. Mid laners get 10 less gold per cannon minion. And if you give up the lane, like, it's kind of funny because he's kind of doing different sides of the same thing, okay? If you are clearing every wave every time, your income is just slightly lower. You are earning 6 less gold per minute, right? Because getting a cannon every 3 waves, they give 10 less gold. 6 gold per minute is a very small nudge, but it does exist. Meanwhile, mid lane cannon minions, if your opponent leaves and roams and you shove in and go for turret plates, they take a recall or they're doing whatever. If you're going to go for turret damage, or they're going to show up and push your lane down or whatever, or you leave and just don't knock down the cannon yourself, by just taking the roam and taking the fight and then recalling and then showing up to lane late, the turret's going to take more damage. You're going to get more plates taken away from you. And so mid laners have less gold income unless they use this to knock down turret plates. This was in last patch already, so it's already happened. There's AFK detection stuff, so you can get early surrenders if there's an AFK or a leaver. And then if someone leaves or is AFK, you may get less LP loss unless they're in your pre-made or something like that. A bunch of updates to the item shops that they're much more readable, which is great. And some bugs as well, which is cool. You can read those on your own leisure. So we ran very long on this one. Let's do a TLDR. I'm going to get a drink of water, and then we will do our TLDR, and then we'll upload this. I mean, you'd already seen it, but whatever. Alrighty. Patch 10.24 TLDR. Buffs and nerfs, ton of item changes, bunch of skins. Amumu, substantially nerfed. No longer the best tank in the jungle. That is now Rammus or Mundo or Skarner. Amumu should still be totally reasonable, just not 100% pick ban. Hecarim, nerfed to before when he ever got any of his buffs. Now, certainly some of these nerfs may have had to come in because of preseason anyway, being that he already wanted to skip Warrior and go straight to Triforce. Hecarim, in fact, gained power on the preseason. That said, I don't think Hecarim ever needed the buffs. Regardless, Hecarim, definitely very, very strong. These are meaningful nerfs. He will be weaker as a champion. Kayle, losing in practice 5 to 10 to 20% attack speed over the course of an entire game. Multiplicative, it's more like a 3 to 6% DPS decrease. That is not nothing. That is quite meaningful. That's the nerf. Samira loses like 2% of her total damage output when attacking with her sword. But the big deal is this dash range, the acquisition range of the dash when someone is immobilized. Really, really, really big deal for the early laning. She is much less likely to follow up off of something like a max range Nautilus hook or a Lux binding. If you're Blitzcrank, it's not going to be much different. If you are doing a flash flay, you're probably still in range. But if, Leona's getting a max range ult, you're probably not catching the Leona ult with your dash range. That is a very big nerf to Samira's early game. She is going to lose a lot of power here. Tryndamere gains 5 flat damage, and then 0 to 20 damage off of Q rank. When at 1% health, a very meaningful Tryndamere damage bump. This should allow him to push more toward things like Phantom Dancer. Um, just basically, he wants more attack speed and crit because he has more attack damage already. Varus gets a really, really substantial buff. So first, we'll cover the nerfs. The R moves about 1/4 slower. That is meaningful. The W damage is, in fact, going down by 2.5 per rank past rank 1. And you are no longer getting piercing arrow cooldown off detonating blight against minions and monsters. However, Blight's damage, which is 9 to 15% based on rank when at full stacks, is going to be increased by the extra 4.5 to 7.5% based on rank if you can full charge a Q, which is substantial damage increase. In fact, if you switch from maxing W second to maxing W third, at virtually all points in the game, W still deals more damage when blown up by Q. This is a very, very big damage increase. Also useful is the fact that Blight Stack Detonation, now it's only on champions and epic monsters, which is Dragon, Baron, and Herald, refresh all basic cooldowns by 12% per stack. If all you ever did was pop 3 stacks of Q, it would still be a buff to Q's cooldown refund. Just, again, no longer against minions and monsters. But it also affects the E. It also allows your E to refresh your Q. All things considered, this should be a very, very large buff to Varus, who should be able to constantly weave spells and auto attacks in a team fight. I believe he should not be doing Rageblade on hit. I believe he should not be doing full lethality, no attack speed. His real build is going to look a lot more like conventional marksman itemization, or at least some level of attack speed mixed in with everything else. There's even a small chance AP Varus works out in the end because you're going to do Nashers and your cooldown's going to line up really well, and it's a possibility. Not certain. I think this is an overall very large buff to Varus, and it's a very exciting set of changes. I absolutely love the design of this refresh. Yasuo and Yone no longer take double crit chance before they look at Rageblade. Rageblade is only going to be, 25 on hit damage per cloak of agility and not 50 on hit damage per cloak of agility. That's a really big deal, of course, but that's the changes being made. Goodbye, Rageblade, Yasuo, and Yone. Blade of the Ruin King, slightly weaker. Cosmic Drive, slightly stronger. Demonic Embrace, as well as Nashor's and Lichbane, all getting slightly weaker. Eclipse, pretty moderate cooldown increase. We'll see how much this really matters because the upfront is the part that matters a lot. But we pretty much get in the territory of ranged champions likely not getting a second cast off on a team fight anymore. Ember Knife and Hailblade now are 2.5x as good for AoE abilities, and about 18% weaker for single target ones. This is a really, really, really big deal for Karthus and Brand Jungle or whatever, and any mage jungler who's doing a lot of damage through their spells, but are also really, really squishy, are going to get a lot more health back in the jungle. On the other side, of course, we have the fact that tank junglers are gaining a lot as well. Amumu obviously wants to heal 2.5x as much off of Despair and Tantrum. Of course. But Amumu and Rammus and Dr. Mundo already could clear the jungle reasonably healthy anyway. Now they'll be more healthy, and it will be a buff to them. It will, in fact, be meaningful. But the bet is that this is more of a buff to mages who are not even able to clear. And that's probably true. Essence Reaver gets 10 more AD, which it needed because all the Essence Reaver champions were just feeling really, really bad off the fact that they had no bonus AD in their builds. Kraken Slayer gets 5 AD and 50% higher damage ratio on the Kraken Slayer true damage passive. This is a really, really, really big deal. It means that up front, the damage goes from 69 to 91 or something. I forget exactly, but it's almost a 30% damage increase just when you buy it by itself, and then it trends toward 50% more damage because, of course, as you build more items. Very, very, very big deal. Leander's Anguish loses some AP ratio on its flat damage burn. Lichbane loses 0.1 AP ratio. I want to point out something real quick, which is there's math on how good Lichbane is. Avert your eyes for a second. It's bright. Here is Lichbane even after the nerf, okay? At 600 ability power, super duper late game, still does more damage than 10.22's version even at 600 AP. Yes, the cooldown is still longer. That, of course, can be relevant in some cases, but when you compare what it allowed you to do early on in the game with this item, it looks pretty sick. This item was substantially more effective as an early purchase, remains true because of the total AD, or the base AD ratio bump onto it, which I'm a fan of. It's good stuff. Ludens gets a small move speed and AP ratio nerf. Moods of Manure gets a very substantial healing increase to the tune of about 50% at most points in time. Gnash's Tooth loses some of its on-hit damage. Night Harvester going down by 50 damage. Rockabelt going down by 25 to 50 damage. All pretty big nerfs to AP champions. We'll scroll down to Riftmaker, losing, instead of 15%, it's 10% max bonus damage, which you can kind of double when you consider it as true damage down the line. So really big nerf to Riftmaker here as well. Fan Ransom gets 200 gold off. Prowler's Claw gets 5 AD. It's a lot of items that were under purchased getting better. And a lot of champions that were basically a lot of classes that were too good getting nerfed. Mages were winning the preseason, tanks winning the preseason. Mage junglers that were really screwed, trying their best. Tier basically stacks 90 mana faster, which is 20% faster. But you get 10 total extra mana off of Seraphs and Muramana, which, whatever, but it's true. Pretty meaningful stuff. Like, those are pretty big buffs. I'm kind of sad this isn't just like strictly 250, just the same amount as Sapphire Crystal. Like, just let it. Maybe it's whatever, but you coulda, you coulda. Not a big deal, regardless. Mid lane minion changes happened in the previous patch, so we're not going to include the TLDR. AFK detection for some early surrenders, losing less LP, cool stuff. Item shop looks better, wonderful. So ultimately, this patch has very, very large buffs to Kraken Slayer, nerfs across the board to mages, hopeful buffs to mage junglers, and then a couple of really OP champions getting nerfed down. Should be pretty good overall. Pretty fun patch, and should be fun to play. See you next time. Bye-bye.